On April 14, 2003, Yellowstone Park Ranger Heath Davidson joined the search for a missing couple that were last seen heading off the Slough Creek Trail path into the wild. Now, as an experienced ranger, Heath wanted to help. In joining that search, armed with a handgun and a disposable camera, he had no inkling of the horrors that he was about to witness. Ones beyond his wildest imagination. This is Heath Davidson's account of what he saw that day and why some areas of Yellowstone are restricted to public access. Missing persons report dated April 13th in 2003. Rebecca Jones, 21-year-old female, 5'6", long dark hair, slim build. Last seen on the Slough Creek Trail at Silvertip Ranch wearing a white t-shirt with blue trim sleeves and denim shorts. Last seen with her boyfriend. Missing person, Tate Growley, 24-year-old male, 5'9", shaved head, slim build. Seen wearing a black band t-shirt and ripped jeans. Has a dragon tattoo on his left arm. The call came in the early hours of Monday morning while I was getting ready for work. A young couple were last spotted by another hiker arguing on the Slough Creek Trail. The hiker recalls seeing the woman upset as she stepped off the trail, and the man trying to joke it off and told the hiker, "Darn women, always misunderstanding things," before he went off after her. Now, when Rebecca Jones failed to arrive home, her family reported her missing. Then, Tate's brother confirmed that he hadn't returned home either. His car was found in the parking lot, and the pieces all led to one thing. The couple were still out there, somewhere in the park. Now, it was my daughter's birthday, and I had promised her that I would be there for breakfast, a promise that now, on answering the early morning call from work, I now regretted making. As I crept toward the door, I heard footsteps from the stairs and saw her sitting there watching me. I apologized, and I told her that people needed my help and I had to leave. She looked sad, but then she nodded. I was really proud of her. And then she passed me her disposable camera that she loved and told me to take a picture of an animal. I found myself agreeing, another promise I thought I probably wouldn't be able to keep. But I shoved that camera in my pocket and I didn't give it any more thought as I left the house. Now, as I reached the parking lot and saw the search party gathered there, I felt this nervous energy swarm through my veins. It's a lot of pressure knowing that you have a part to play in finding two young people's lives. Nature, it's beautiful, but it can be deadly. Human beings are fragile when it comes to the elements, and factoring in the lack of water and food. All it takes is one slip or fall, and it's a waiting game on their part, and then it's a finding game on ours. These rescue missions are a race against the clock. We all know that. I just didn't know what I was heading into. If I had then, well, I don't know what I would have done differently. There's nothing I could have done other than not go and not see what I saw. They went through the usual checks before they began the search, testing the radios and checking all the equipment. I led them toward the path where the pair was last seen, and as the search team splintered off in different directions, I went off with the small team, down the bank and beyond the thick mass of trees. This trail can be treacherous enough on the designated route. The paths are steep and dangerous, and it isn't for the faint-hearted. This area was known for its bear and coyote sightings, and it wasn't long before I saw signs of recent animal activity. Bent twigs, indented dirt, scratch marks in the bark, and fir clumps tangled in the low-hanging branches. Time ticked by, and there were no signs of missing people. Being one of the more challenging hikes, setting off the path meant it could be hazardous. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was highly possible that they had plummeted to their deaths and could be lost forever. I was looking at this clump of fir when I noticed something blow in the breeze and catch on a nearby rock. I looked back at one of the search team, a man called Chris, and I quickly shouted and I waved him over. I saw him looking my way. I was sure he'd heard me. Now, as I reached the branch, I saw it clear as day. Human hair, dark and matted in something smudged red. I turned back and shouted, "Chris, take a look at this!" As I reached for the branch of the cedar tree, I slipped and I felt myself falling. I rolled down the steep incline. I tried my best to shield my head with my hands, and I let my body fall into the momentum, scraping past rocks and bushes, and I landed at the bottom, shrubs finally breaking my fall. I opened my eyes and I blinked away the dirt that clung to me as I gasped for breath. I stared around me at the tangles of roots and branches, cursed myself for ending up in this situation. I was meant to be helping the rescue team, not needing to be rescued myself. I managed to sit up and brush the dirt off me, conscious of not wanting to look unprofessional if Chris or someone suddenly found me. I coughed on the dust caught in my throat, and I leaned forward trying to croak it out and pull myself up at the same time. And then I heard a static sound coming from a sage bush and cursed myself. It was my radio. Out of all the places for it to land, it had to be a prickly, unforgiving shrub, but it could have been worse. At least I hadn't fallen into it. I started thinking of how I could grab my radio without shredding my skin to bits. Through the gaps, when my coughing fell silent, I heard something behind me. A snapping of twigs. I turned my head, expecting to see Chris there and have him snicker at the situation that I had landed in. But it wasn't Chris. What I saw made me clutch my hand to my mouth, desperate to hold back my cough. My eyes, now wide with fear. It was a creature, but like none I'd seen before. It was too big to be a dog, but it had similarities. Its thick fur was jet black, so it was like a shadow, and it stood on its hind legs. Eyes stared at me, these round black beads that were wide with hunger. It was foaming at the mouth, and tangled in its claws were strands of that long dark hair. I stayed still, my hands clasped against my mouth, and not quite believing my own eyes. That thing, it sniffed at the air and then, to my horror, started edging toward me, on just its hind legs. I felt the dust tickling my throat. I tried to suppress it. My throat burned in trying to do this. I closed my eyes and I gave a silent prayer. With bears, it's best to play dead, so even though this was clearly no bear, that's what I did. I kept my eyes pressed shut and I lulled my head on my shoulder. I heard it patter closer to me. I heard its grunt-like breaths. I wanted to reach for my handgun, but I was too afraid to move. I was a park ranger. It should be second nature to me, but I don't know. I guess I wasn't trained to deal with creatures like that. It was terrifying. It was scratching next to me, long, endless scratches at the ground, but then the scratching stopped. I dared to squint one eye open just to see what it was doing, and I saw its shadow dark fur and the foaming red drops that fell from its mouth as it sniffed and it swiped a paw at the bush, unfazed by the spikes. I tried to slowly edge away from it. That was a hard task to do while keeping one hand over my mouth, and as I shuffled away, my hand slipped away from my mouth, and my cough croaked out, and the creature instantly stopped what it was doing and it turned and it looked at me. And that wasn't all. In its mouth was an arm, a human arm, the tendons visible that showed it was torn clean off its body. It flopped as it hung from that creature's mouth. I saw fragments of black fabric embedded into the flesh, and there was something on that arm, visible beneath the dried-on blood. A tattoo, one of a dragon. The creature looked at me, its black eyes connecting with my hazel eyes. I dare not look away, not even for one instant, and I just stared at it, thinking that this must be it, that I was going to die out there at the hands of this unknown creature. I thought about my family. I thought about my daughter's birthday. The thought of never seeing them again was excruciating. The thought of this being my last moment on Earth was even worse. I didn't want my torn off limbs to be lost to nature, okay? I did not want to be lost to this endless place, and I could see it flare its nostrils as if it was deliberating what to do. I thought I was a goner, so I slowly reached my hand to my belt for my handgun, and as I did this, I felt her disposable camera in my pocket. I heard shouting pierce through the trees. Calls for Rebecca and Tate, but also now, for me. That thing twitched its ears, gave me one last look, and then turned and headed toward the trees. That limp arm still gripped beneath its sharp teeth like some dog with a bone that he wouldn't give back. I had a moment now to react, and I didn't grab the handgun. I grabbed the disposable camera and I took the shot. I only had time for one snap. By the time I wound that camera dial to take another picture, it had vanished beyond the trees. For a second, I thought, it's over. Foolish of me. It wasn't over. There was something in its place, rustling free of the trees. At first, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. I mean, it was a man, or at least what remained of one. His skin and clothing were so shredded that they seemed to meld as one. He was a combination of dried blood, jutting bones, and saggy skin. And there was a chunk of flesh missing from his right ankle. I didn't know how it was possible for him to still be standing. I stared at him in disbelief, and I stared at the spot where his arm was missing, and a gaping mass of tendons and red remained. I dropped her camera, but I didn't try to pick it up. I promised my daughter I would take a picture of an animal, not this. I was staring at this man, knowing that it must be Tate, but not knowing how or why he had come to be this. I managed to mutter something to him, his name, I think. He looked straight through me and itched at the spot where his arm stopped. A howl came from the trees, and Tate turned and he walked off, dragging his bent foot along the ground. I gripped my handgun in shaky hands and I aimed it at the trees, and I stared like that for I don't know how long. What happened next was a blur. I managed to get up onto my feet and stick my hand into the sage bush to grab that radio. The next thing I knew, I was explaining what happened to Chris and some of the other members of the search team. I told them about that strange creature and Tate. I said I had just seen him, but he was beyond saving. And they looked at me like I was crazy, and they thought I must have hit my head. I knew I wasn't making this up. I saw what I saw. They searched the area for Tate, but they didn't find him. The next day, I went down to the photo shop. I gave him the camera roll to develop, and when I got that photo back, I gasped. It was grainy in places, but even so, I could see something in it. A shadow creature. It was far too big to be a dog, and standing on its hind legs as it disappeared into the trees. Visible to the side of its head were what looked like fingers. That was all the proof I needed for myself to know I saw what I saw. I also remember this glazed over look in the Photoshop man's eyes as he handed me the envelope. I showed that picture to my wife and brother, and their faces twisting in horror on seeing that creature and a limp arm hanging from its mouth. I made a promise to my daughter, one that I intended on keeping, but I could not show her that picture while she was still that age. I vowed to keep it safe and show her when she was older and would be better to understand what she was seeing. There are many creatures living out in Yellowstone Park, ones that have been there long before us and will continue to be there, and ones that just come to be. 3 days after Heath Davidson's ordeal, a fire broke out at his home, and although no one was hurt, all of the family's possessions were destroyed, including that photo. To this day, Heath refuses to talk about the fire and whether he believes it was caused deliberately or not. Rumor has it that he hid negatives somewhere away from his home, and proof of the dogman creature he saw is still out here somewhere. Rebecca Jones and Tate Growley were never found. To this day, there are still reported sightings happening in Yellowstone National Park of unknown creatures. In 2008, a hiker named Raj Kumar disappeared on the Slough Creek Trail. 3 days later, he was found in the meadow close to Buffalo Fork Trail, shaken and dehydrated. Once recovered, he spoke of how a monstrous furred creature had been hunting him for days. Yellowstone National Park remains one of the most beautiful places on the planet, but within that beauty lurk many unknowns, ones whose capabilities and dark needs are beyond comprehension. For more scary horror stories, please subscribe.